We are in February. We're in February already. And it's time to move to our second spoke on the wheel. So, just to catch everybody up, at the beginning of the year, we looked at what we're going to cover this year, the 12 different spokes of the wheel of life. And the first spoke was basically living in wonder, giving us the tools of kind of where we were going this year. And now that we've entered this second month, the focus is our inner life. And I believe that we're kind of starting with our inner life because we know that what is going on in that realm of our life is actually determining the quality of everything that's happening out here in our life as experiences. So if we can kind of get our inner life straightened out, so to speak, everything else can fall into place a little bit easier. So the talk of my title today is, who am I? How do you answer that question when someone asks you, who are you? If someone walks up and says that, what do you say? Before you answer, I'm going to tell you a little story. So it's a parable, and it says, a good person made his transition, and when he arrives at the gates of heaven, he knocks, knocks, knocks 3 times, and he hears the voice of God who asked him who he is. And he answers, I am. And to this answer, God says, I'm sorry, heaven's full. There's no room for you. Come back another time. So the good man returns to earth and he meditates for a long time on the answer he received until he feels ready to return to heaven. And again, he knocks on the gates of heaven, pound, pound, pound. And he hears the same voice of God asking him who he is. And he answers, I am. And again, he receives the same reply. So the good man returns and he meditates even more deeply on the answer he received until he feels ready again to return for a 3rd time. And when he arrives at the gates of heaven, he knocks 3 times. And he hears the same voice of God asking, who are you? And this time he answers, you are. And the gates of heaven open wide, and God said to him, there was no room for me and someone else. So the moral of the story is that God is all there is. God's all there is. And until we can recognize that for ourselves, we really don't have access to the state of mind that is heavenly. So I will ask again, if someone asks you who you are, how do you answer? You are. So if you were asked that question and gave a typical answer, what do? We start off with where we're from, or we start off perhaps with what we do for a living, or maybe we talk about one of the roles we play. I'm a mom, I'm an aunt, I'm a sister, I'm a son, I'm a father, whatever. Or perhaps you start listing qualities of yourself that you're proud of. It's a very interesting question because how you define yourself tells other people a whole lot about you, but should also tell you a lot about who you are and how you feel about yourself and what's important to you. So pretty much we're taught to identify ourselves by describing our physical or emotional or logistical details. That's what we do. The human mind wants to categorize everyone into groups to kind of simplify everything and increase our speed of understanding and relating. But we sort ourselves out based pretty much on superficial details. On a deeper level, spirituality invites us to look at ourselves from a completely different viewpoint. So what I like to say is we have 1 foot down on the human plane of existence, and we have 1 foot down on the spiritual level. And the more balanced we can stand between those 2 things, we kind of straddle both those worlds, the more effective we can be in living. And around here, I like to keep saying, touch that foot down on spirituality, touch it down. Make sure that you're anchoring your human experience with that spiritual foundation. Because I want you to start identifying yourself, really, really identifying yourself as a spiritual being having a human experience. So it doesn't matter what you call that deeper aspect of yourself, but to keep things simple, I'm going to call it your soul. Okay, your soul. First and foremost, you are a soul. You're a soul. As a soul, you are a stream of energy that has its source in God, an original source. And that energy stream is always connected to source. Your soul is your life energy. Ernest Holmes says, we believe that spirit is embodied in everyone and that we are all embodiments of one spirit, one life source. You know, each and every one of us has something that's called a cosmology. Do you know what a cosmology is? A cosmology is this set of beliefs that we all carry around about who we are and how we're related to something bigger than ourselves, to the universe, the purpose of everything. And your cosmology is how you answer the very big questions about life. Now, there are lots and lots of stories in science and philosophy and in religion about how and why your soul came to be in a body and live on this physical plane. There are thousands of books written on the subject. You can argue which one is the most correct, but you know what? It's all just opinion. And the most beautiful thing about this philosophy is we don't tell you what to think. We just want you to know what you think. We don't tell you what to believe, but we highly encourage you to understand what beliefs are living your life. We want you to know and own your cosmology. So how you tell yourself the story about why your soul incarnated is very important, because the answer to this question truly and deeply impacts how you view your life as you live it. So here's what makes the most sense to me. Energy takes form in order to express as that form, and then it transforms to express as something else. Life is just simply there to be. So a flower lives to create the experience of flowers on this human plane. Just here to simply do whatever flowers do. Everything flowers do is a normal flower experience. A rabbit lives to express rabbitness onto this physical plane, here simply to do whatever rabbits do. And whatever a rabbit is doing is a normal rabbity thing to do. So therefore, I believe that human beings live to create the experience of humanity, here to simply do and be everything that humans do and be. And if you're doing or being in it, it's a normal human-y thing to do on the physical plane. Got it? Okay, so as life forms become more complex, there is more and more self-awareness, and therefore more and more free will of choice. As life forms learn more about their own expression, they evolve and change their choices. For example, once a dolphin learns that if he jumps through a hoop, he's going to get a fish, guess what he's going to choose to do? He's going to choose to jump for the fish. Once a dog is trained, they will predictably choose to be rewarded too. And they transform them from this like wild, unruly puppy into all the way to a complicated service animal. They can evolve that far. As consciousness increases, choice increases, and the possibility of transformation increases too. So here we are all as souls, taking the form of a human to do what all life forms do, express and create experiences of being human, and growing and learning and transforming. We're given a personality, we're given a body, a magic suit, we're given a mind, we're given an emotional center to go about this physical plane, having these human experiences, making choices, getting trained into good behavior, and learning about how all of life works. It's our magic suit and all its bells and whistles. That's what we were given, our souls were given when we got here. And we are greeted on this human plane by other human beings who've been here a little bit longer than we have been, and those other humans start training us to behave the way they want us to behave. And they use all kinds of different tools and methods and techniques and treats of training. They tell stories about how life works and what is true and what is false. And over time, we assimilate into our families and into the other structures that are there to greet us. And if you want to look more closely at this, I invite you to look at the beginning of the Four Agreements book, because it's really, really interesting. But we use our minds to interpret what's going around us by thinking about the world. We use our hearts to interpret what's going on around us by feeling emotions about the world. We use our bodies to interpret what is going on around us by using our five senses. And these are the tools that Source gave us to let us know when something is our true nature and when something's out of alignment with our true nature. So we teach here that our true nature is divine. Well, what do we mean by that? At our spiritual core, at the deepest level of ourselves, our energy is pure. It's from Source. Remember I said we're connected to Source. So our internal initial energy is pure. It's joyful, it's loving, it's peaceful, it's free, it's heavenly, it's at ease. It knows that everything else is a part of the whole, and it's good too, right? Therefore, it is universally loving. That is our true nature. It's best observed in young children who've not yet assimilated to all the things they've been taught. So our true nature has no fear. Our true nature has no fear. At the deepest levels, our souls are here to have human experiences and are not resistant to what kinds of human experiences we have. Life just is. Life just wants to be. Life just wants to be in that form that it's in, doing whatever that form does, flower, rabbit, dog, or human. Get it? Right? So therefore, all fear we have is on the human ego level, the survival level. Basically, we fear what we are taught to fear. We fear whatever we were taught is bad or harmful or deadly or threatening or different than us. Because our souls are fearless. We just know that life is meant to be lived. And diversity of experience is just what we're here to have. And when we use our minds correctly, our emotions correctly, and our bodies correctly, those tools work together to let us know when we are in alignment with Spirit and when changes or adjustments are needed to get ourselves back to our true selves. If we're going to be centered in our inner life, we have to understand what is going on under the surface in our minds and our bodies and our hearts. We have to get an understanding about what fears are ruling our lives and start returning to our natural state of love. And that takes consciousness. It takes awareness. And I believe our journey here on earth is to increase our consciousness, increase our awareness, and return to love. Keep returning to love. Because our minds are very busy places, aren't they? They are just so busy. Thoughts are racing around all the time, interpreting what's going on around us. They're processing very quickly to keep us safe, as defined by our training. And don't forget that we were taught what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So our minds are racing ahead, trying to figure out what's good for us and what's not good for us, what's dangerous, what will get us a reward and what will not get us a reward. We filter out so much because our minds have already discarded so much as not being important. We have these filters that were given to us, and we filter out everything that's not important to us. And we make meaning of everything, thinking all the time. But when we decide to live more in alignment with our spirit or our soul, it's very important to stay aware of what our minds are doing. If our thoughts are not loving and peaceful and harmonious, that's a call for soulfulness, because our minds have been overtaken by our humanness, our human conditioning and our training, and we're not in alignment with Spirit. When our minds are not in alignment with Spirit or our highest self, our hearts and our bodies are going to start trying to give us clues. If we pay attention, we can shift, and it starts with our thoughts. It starts with our thoughts. No one can tell you what to think. Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, the late Viktor Frankl, famously said, "Our greatest human freedom is that despite whatever our physical situation is in life, we are always free to choose our thoughts." So having a healthy and thriving inner life is to know your thoughts and to have discipline over them. Because if you find yourself having thoughts that are not reflective of your divine nature, thoughts of fear or limitation, basically, you have the freedom to think a different thought. And it takes great awareness and a willingness to think something else. But this practice is the cornerstone of living in alignment with our inner spirit. When we think in ways, as I said, that are not in alignment, our other tools step up to let us know that. Our emotional heart and our bodies will let you know. Fear and limitation feels different to each one of us, right? But the more we are attuned to what those lower vibrations feel like in our hearts and bodies, the quicker we can retrain our minds to think differently. So let's say you're having a fearful and limiting thought about something in your life. We'll take something small. I don't like my new coworker. My job is harder because of her incompetence. Blah, 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 right? You think these thoughts as you drive to work. You think them when you're sitting right next to that coworker, when you're with your friends and so on. That's all going on. These thoughts are not helpful to you. They're not in alignment with the higher truth of oneness, and they don't make you feel good either. They're causing some anxiousness in your body and causing your emotions to be less than peaceful too. So what do? How can you realign yourself to your soul? You have to pay attention to that off feeling inside you. So I'm going to tell you a personal story. If you've been in class, you might have heard it before. But anyway, many years ago, I had such a coworker, and I was saying all those kinds of things about her. And her name was Faye. Faye died somewhere around, I don't think around 2009 or something like that. But I know she would appreciate me telling this story because it illustrates what I'm talking about. When I first met Faye, she was actually helpful to me. I was really young. I was like in my early 20s. And she would encourage me in my career, and I thought she was funny. I knew other people didn't really like her, but I thought she was just great. But over time, I was promoted and I became her peer. And suddenly I started having experiences with her that showed me kind of why other people didn't like her too much. She was very competitive, and she really resented other people's success, and that included mine. And she would speak negatively about everyone. And she wouldn't speak to the person she was talking about. She'd kind of speak loudly into the air so that, everybody could hear. And I really didn't have much good to say about her either. And I dreaded any interaction I had with her. And as I kept being promoted, her resentment of me grew and grew, so I just avoided her. And eventually I was promoted and moved to Seattle, and I didn't have to work with her or compete with her anymore for that matter. And I kind of watched her career from afar, but I still didn't like her. That off feeling was inside of me. So as you may know, I found spirituality when I got to Seattle. And when I got to the lessons about forgiveness, that off feeling about Faye would rise in me in class and stuff like that. I realized that my thoughts about her were not in alignment with my true nature. Because every time I thought about her, my body would feel frustrated. My body would constrict and recoil. My heart wasn't right. So I began to apply these spiritual principles to that relationship and forgiveness techniques. And I didn't communicate with her directly. I just worked to kind of release the old garbage out of me. And eventually, she was working on the national training team, and eventually I was on a national team too. And unexpectedly, we both ended up in the same hotel in Minneapolis at a meeting. And people knew that we were both from Atlanta, so it didn't take us very long to realize that we were both at the same meeting. And the very first evening I was there, my hotel phone rang. This was before the days of cell phone. Your room phone rang. And it was Faye. And she wanted to know if I would come up to her room and order room service and kind of catch up. And I had to make a split-second choice. Would I hold to my old fears and avoid her? Or would I trust my forgiveness practices and go? Would I do it? So I chose to go, and I'm really glad I did. Because that night, Faye wanted to meet me in her room as opposed to the restaurant bar or the restaurant or bar down in the lobby, because she wanted to confide in me that she had cancer. And we never actually spoke about the hard stuff that we had gone through, but she obviously wanted to repair our connection. And the bottom line is that we stayed connected for the rest of her life. I was one of the last friends that saw her before she transitioned, and I actually got to go to my very first Jewish funeral because of Faye. So she taught me even after her passing. See, I was trained when I was young, and maybe you were trained this way too, that when someone was mean to you or spoke to you badly or disrespected you in some way, they were your nemesis. They were your enemy, and you acted accordingly, right? If they didn't own up to their mistakes and ask for forgiveness, they weren't owed your forgiveness. That off feeling, I was taught when you feel that off thing, you just avoid or punish the person, right? But when I began to reclaim my inner life, and I started realigning my thoughts with higher principles and truth, many, many things that I had been taught had to be discarded. If thoughts didn't bring peace to my heart and vibrance to my body, I needed to re-examine them and release them. If thoughts had fears attached to them at all, I needed to examine them and release them. My life depended on it. I knew I needed to examine my life. Socrates, so long ago, Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living. This year, we're going to examine our lives. You are a God being. You're a divine spark in the mind of the universe, and its life is your life. The spirit within you is God, and it is perfect. And as long as you're alive, that inner part of you, your soul, will be using your body and your mind and your heart to communicate with you and call you toward greater alignment. But you gotta listen and pay attention. You know, maybe you were born into circumstances and the family support system where you were taught how divine you are, right? But I don't know many people who came from that kind of background. I see heads shaking. You know, most of us were taught that we were flawed in so many ways, and everyone else is flawed too. And if we could find other people more flawed than we were, we could feel better about ourselves. We were trained to look for the things we could judge to make ourselves feel better, but our souls are not satisfied living like that. They just aren't. Our souls know the truth of oneness, and they desire wholeness and connection with everything going on. Our souls want us to remember who we are, to increase our consciousness, and heal ourselves from this conditioning of fear and limitation from our younger years in order to be free. That's what we're doing. You know, our conditioning and training would also make us think that we've made so many mistakes, you know, and we're unworthy of all this happiness these people around here are talking about. You know, there's nothing that you can do to change your true identity. Absolutely nothing. Nothing can damage or diminish that light inside of you. Nothing. And if you choose to reclaim your identity and walk that spiritual path of love, what's going to happen? Your self-esteem will begin to rise beyond your wildest dreams. If you can treat yourself according to your unchangeable divine nature, you're going to stop all the self-judgment, and your life will shift and change before your very eyes. Not for nothing did Jesus say, know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. The truth is that God is love. God is in you, and therefore love is in you. Love is all that exists. Love is the divine energy that runs in every human being, and it has no end. And that love is the only ingredient we need to reveal as our true self. Don't let the world define who you are. Don't let your early training define who you are. Don't let your fears define who you are. Let your inner life teach you and guide you to defining yourself as the highest loving soul, your spiritual self. Loving yourself is the most important thing you can do. Loving yourself is the root cause of all good. Loving yourself means allowing your body and your heart to inform you of your position in relationship to your soul, and not allowing your mind to steer every moment toward protecting your ego. Our greatest need as a spiritual being is love. When we love, we're in heaven. When we withhold love, we are in hell. It all begins with accepting responsibility of our inner life. Our thoughts belong to us. Our emotions belong to us. Our bodies belong to us. And the energy that runs through those tools is either loving or fearful. We must accept responsibility for what kind of energy we are running, because that energy is constantly spilling out into our lives, attracting to us the people and situations who will show us who we are and what kind of energy we are running. As promised, I'm going to start offering practices, some spiritual practices to actually take home that will support you in all these different areas of your life. So in February, I'm going to be suggesting things that can help you improve your connection to your inner life. So I invite you to practice this. Stop. Stop at the end of the day and just pause and go within. Just quiet your mind and ask yourself about your experience of your day. What message does your body have for you about this day? What message does your heart have for you about this day? How connected to your soul or your highest loving self were you this day? Then write down your answers and set an intention for the next day. And most of all, from now on, when someone asks you who you are, the truest answer is that you are a spiritual being of love. And it all starts with loving yourself, honoring your soul, and extending that love toward everyone else on their unique soul journey. Will you join me in prayer? Here's what I know. What I know is that feeling inside of aliveness is God itself showing up as love. It is our truest nature. It is our truest identity. And I know that right now. I know that for myself, and I know it for everyone listening to this lesson. God is love, and God is within. And when we connect to that and we allow it to express through us, our life becomes more loving. And so from this moment forward, we allow our bodies to inform us when we are off that love. We allow our hearts to tell us when we are disconnected from that knowing of love. We allow our minds to realign themselves to love. It's who we really are. I'm thankful for the opportunity to teach. I'm thankful for the opportunity to share this knowledge with anyone who will listen, because it is so life-changing. And so with gratitude, I just let go and know that each and every one of us has a true color that wants to shine through. And that color is love. And so it is.